Hey, good afternoon. We are going to do a read aloud on the Renaissance. Let me just get us set up here. So, without further ado, remember we should be taking notes and answering questions as we go along. The governments of the Italian city-states. What types of governments did the Italian city-states have? Two forms of government dominated city-states in Italy, the Signoria, principality, and republicanism. In the Signoria, one powerful family controlled the government. The leader of this family was a ruling prince known as the Signore. City-states that were ruled by the system of republicanism were also controlled by wealthy families. But unlike a Signora, a group of powerful families worked together to govern the city. The Signora. Many Italian city-states in the late 1200s suffered from internal conflicts. Various groups often fought each other in an attempt to gain power. A strong family sometimes defeated their opposition and established a Signora. Although the establishment of a Signora usually ended in conflict within a city-state, average citizens had little to say in the government. The Signore had the power to control most aspects of the government, including passing laws and choosing a successor. The Signora was often established in cities such as Milan, Verona, and Padua, and had many artisans and farmers, but not many powerful families. It made it possible for one family to gain control. Republicanism. The larger city-states, such as Venice and Florence, had numerous strong, wealthy families. These conditions made it difficult for one family to gain control over the city-state. In city-states like these, the ruling family formed republics. In a republic, a group of wealthy families ruled together. For example, in Venice, wealthy families formed the Great Council that consisted of about 1,000 members from the upper class. These members were elected representatives to the Senate and the Council of Ten. The Council of Ten was very powerful and controlled the police and judicial system. The Senate dealt with foreign policy and commerce. All of the candidates in the Senate and the Council of Ten had to be members of the Great Council. In this way, the Republic of Venice was a closed system. No person outside the Great Council could play a role in government. In Florence, the wealthy families set up a group called the Popolo, which consisted of members of the elite class, such as wealthy merchants. The Popolo elected 6 members of their group to serve as supreme magistrates of Florence. These magistrates supposedly ruled the city. However, in reality, the Popolo Grasso, literally the fat people, held most of the power. The Popolo Grasso included extremely wealthy bankers and merchants such as the Medici family. Next, a shift in thinking. How did a change in thinking lead to the development of the Renaissance? During the Middle Ages, the religion of Christianity dominated Europe. Theology, or the study of God, was considered the most important type of learning. Because of the central role religion played in society and culture, most people focused on the goal of reaching heaven after they died. Because of this, many people believed that the life was merely a series of sufferings and temptations that must be endured and resisted in order to achieve the heavenly reward of eternal life. In the mid-1300s, a few scholars began to change this way of thinking. They developed a philosophy that is now known as humanism. Today, the term humanism implies focusing on human concerns and disregarding religious matters. However, the early humanists did not reject Christianity. Instead of focusing on the afterlife, humanists used religious ideals and thoughts to look for solutions to the problems and concerns of the living. Indeed, they viewed any learning that helped people solve their problems and improve their lives to be worth pursuing. During this time, many classical Greek and Roman texts were rediscovered, translated, and made available to a wide audience. The humanists realized that the teachings and philosophies of ancient Greece and Rome offered many ideas that could be applied to the concerns of everyday life. They identified with the logical approach the Greeks and Romans used in their philosophies and saw it as a model for using reason to find solutions to everyday problems. Like the Greeks and Romans, the humanists thought subjects such as politics, ethics, and science should be studied rationally and separated from existing preconceptions that were tied to religious doctrine. The humanist goal of improving life led to advances in science, literature, architecture, and the arts. In addition, humanists emphasized the importance of free inquiry and criticism in the development of new ideas. The shift in thinking brought forth a flourishing of learning that came to be called the Renaissance. The development of humanism. How did humanism develop? Two Italian scholars, Petrarch and Giovanni Boccaccio, are considered the first Renaissance humanists. These two friends realized that the works of the ancient Greeks and Romans were important and could be useful in their pursuit to improve people's lives. However, these works were not widely available in Europe in the 1300s. In an attempt to find more classical Greek and Roman manuscripts, Petrarch and Boccaccio began to search the libraries of monasteries throughout Europe. There they found old copies of the classical works. Petrarch, Boccaccio, and other humanists studied these works, translated them, and even prepared new editions. Petrarch, as well as other late Renaissance thinkers, believed that the ideas of Plato validated or supported the beliefs of Christianity. For example, both Christianity and Plato shared the belief in immortality of the human soul and an all-powerful God who created the world. Humanists thought that many aspects of ancient Greek and Roman civilization, such as the arts, sciences, and government, could serve as models for improving their societies. Eventually, the achievements of ancient Greece and Rome began to influence scholars and artists throughout Italy and later throughout Europe. Art began to focus on humans rather than religious themes. Artists painted what they observed. Science was advanced by the humanist idea of examining the natural world and challenging existing ideals. At the same time, cities were developing and growing throughout Europe. Medieval thinkers often viewed cities as wicked places that could lead people astray. The humanists, however, believed cities were places where people could develop and use civic virtues such as justice, courage, and compassion. Because of this, cities would become an integral part in the development of the Renaissance. The birthplace of the Renaissance. Why did the Renaissance begin in Italy? The Renaissance began in Italy during the mid-1300s. During the Middle Ages, most of Europe was divided into fiefs, which were ruled by lords or vassals. These fiefs often consisted of a manor house and surrounding farmland. Large cities did not exist in most of these regions. However, Italy had developed independent city-states rather than fiefs. Italy was divided into more than 200 city-states. A city-state consists of a city and the surrounding area and is ruled independently. Although many of these city-states were small, Italy also contained some of the largest and most powerful cities in Europe, including Florence, Milan, and Venice. In the 1300s, each of these cities had a population of at least 100,000 people. Although Italy was technically part of the Holy Roman Empire, the Italian city-states governed themselves. Because of their access to waterways, many of the Italian city-states had become wealthy through trade. For example, Venice had established a trading empire that dominated the eastern Mediterranean. Luxury goods from Asia, such as silk and spices, flooded into the city. Because of this, the importance of trade, many merchant families in Italy became wealthy and influential. Many of these families supported artists and humanist thinkers. They also encouraged the study of Greek and Roman writers because they wanted the society of their cities to be similar to those of ancient Greece and Rome. These families were considered patrons of the arts and learning. A patron is a person, family, or group that gives money or other support to artists and intellectuals. The Medici family of Florence was one of the most famous patrons in Italy. They controlled the largest bank in Europe and supported such well-known Renaissance artists as Michelangelo and Raphael. Before long, because of the support of wealthy patrons, Renaissance arts and learning began to flourish in Italy. These works showed a strong Greek and Roman influence. However, those civilizations were not the only influences on the Renaissance. Muslims and other peoples' influence on the Renaissance. How did ideas from religious regions outside of Europe influence the Renaissance? The Italian city-states depended on trade. Their trade networks expanded to regions all around the Mediterranean Sea, many which were controlled by Muslims. Contact with these areas not only brought wealth, but also contributed to an exchange of ideas between Europe and the Muslim world. Muslim-ruled areas of Spain, such as Seville and Granada, had become centers of study. Muslim thinkers during this time were strongly influenced by Greek philosophy, especially the ideas of Aristotle. Muslim-ruled areas of Spain, During the Middle Ages in Europe, Muslims had made many scientific and cultural advances. Muslims made breakthroughs in medicine and the use of drugs to cure disease. Muslims Mathematicians used their knowledge of the Indian system of numbers and decimal system to make new discoveries in mathematics, including geometry and algebra. Muslim thinkers also made important advances in the fields of astronomy, geography, and architecture. Much of this knowledge spread to Italy from Muslim traders. The Italians, in turn, used this knowledge to make advances in the arts and learning, thereby enriching the Renaissance. In addition, Venetian trade routes into Asia brought Italy into indirect contact with lands as far away as China. Because of this, Europeans became aware of the Chinese invention of block printing on wood and the process of paper making that the Chinese had developed. Okay, it's going to stop there, and let's go back. How did ideas from regions outside of Europe influence, go there, sorry. What types of government did the Italian city-states, okay? They had two types of government. One was the Signora, and one was the Republican. Okay, you got it? If you looked at the text and go through and individually figure out the information, I need you to do this independently for me. Okay, let's go to the next question. How did a change in thinking lead to the development of the Renaissance? Okay, so stop, go through the text, pull out the information on humanism, a shift away from a focus on religion, and answer the question. Excuse me. How did humanism develop? Go through the text. Okay. Pause if you need to. Move back in the blend space to find this text that's up there. Why did the Renaissance begin in Italy? Okay, we know it has something to do with trading. Okay. And finally, how did ideas from regions outside of Europe influence the Renaissance? Okay. Once you've answered these questions, you can go ahead and continue on. I'll read the last two sections for you. How did the Renaissance spread throughout Europe? During the late 1400s, Renaissance ideas began to spread beyond Italy and into other areas of Europe, including France, Germany, England, the Netherlands, and Spain. Merchants, diplomats, and scholars from these countries sometimes visited Italy. They learned about the philosophy of humanism and saw great works of Renaissance art. When they returned home, they brought with them this newfound knowledge and awareness, which in turn began to influence the cultures of these other nations. Also, during the late 1400s and early 1500s, armies from France, Germany, and Spain invaded Italy. The invading soldiers were impressed by the beautiful Renaissance art and architecture. When they returned home, they spread the news of the marvels they saw in Italy. The leaders of France, England, and Spain had heard about the great advances being made by the Italians in art and learning. These monarchs wanted to incorporate these elements into their own cultures. For example, King Francis I of France brought Leonardo da Vinci and other great Italian artists and scholars to France. King Henry VII of England invited many Italian humanists into his country. These monarchs also became patrons of Renaissance artists from their own nations. Okay, make sure you go ahead and answer that question before you move on. Okay, finally, and I've already into this idea to you a little bit, a growing idea. How did the ideas of the Renaissance continue to spread and grow? As the Renaissance spread through Europe, the ideas continued to advance and grow. Advances in technology also helped to expose more people throughout Europe to Renaissance ideas. In the 1440s, Johannes Gutenberg invented a printing press that greatly influenced the speed of printing books. This invention significantly increased the number of books available to the public, thereby enhancing the spread of humanist ideas. In Northern Europe, scholars developed their own type of humanism called Christian humanism. This movement sought to correct any errors that had been introduced to Christian writing over the years, including the Bible. Christian humanists also used education to reform the church. For example, in his book, The Praise of Folly, Dutchman Desiderius Erasmus criticized the lax morals the lax morals of the church leaders. His friend Sir Thomas More of England attempted to